Let us now begin in Allah's blessed name. What is the Khilafah? The Khilafah is state and government in Islam. What is Islam? The definition of Islam is submission to Allah. What is submission to Allah? Submission to Allah is submission to Allah as Al-Malik. In some translations in English you find Malik as king. No. We don't want that translation tonight. We're dealing with political terminology here tonight. And so Al-Malik is the sovereign. Now that's a word you'll understand. Sovereign. Lahul Mulk, sovereignty belongs to him. And so to submit to Allah in Islam is to submit to Allah as sovereign who possesses sovereignty. To submit to anyone else as sovereign, to declare that anyone else possesses sovereignty, is to say goodbye to Allah. Did you hear that? To submit to Allah is to submit to Allah as Al-Akbar. And He reminds you that He is Al-Akbar, because every time you perform Salat, you cannot move in Salat without Allahu Akbar. Al-Akbar is the one who has supreme authority. And so the Khilafah is a state and government which submits to Allah's authority as supreme. The Khilafah was destroyed. Who destroyed it? Why did they destroy it? How did they destroy it? When did they destroy it? What did they replace it with? And what is its destiny? These are awesomely important questions which very few can answer today. You and I, from the Quran and from the Sunnah, from the Ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, we would know about the magnificent deception of Al-Masih al-Dajjal, who brings the Jews back to the Holy Land, not as tourists, but to reclaim it as their own, between 1919 and 1948, who restores a state of Israel in the Holy Land in 1948, and convinces the one-eyed Jews that this is the Israel of Nabi Dawood alayhi salam and Nabi Sulaiman alayhi salam, but of course it is not, it is an impostor. But they accept it and they embrace it. And that this Israel is about to become the ruling state in the world, replacing the United States of America.
Bible prophecy predicts that they will one day rule the world from their temple throne in Jerusalem, and that the world's King of Kings will be a descendant of King David and King Solomon of Israel. That is what Bible believers all over the world believe will come to pass.
If this is to be accomplished, and the golden age of the Jews is to return one more time, and they are to rule the world, how will they do it? They will need globalization to bring all of mankind together as one global society. And they need to demolish the Ottoman Islamic Empire, which stands in their way. And they will have to demolish the institution of the Khilafah, which is the head of Islam. If you can cut off the head, then you can paralyze the body.
But unbeknownst to either the Arabs or the colonists, the end of the First World War was also the beginning of the end of old world empires. New and powerful ideologies were on the rise, set to change the world forever.
If you can cut off the head, then you can paralyze the body. The attack is now launched to cut off the head, the Khilafah. I'm going to use a long word now. You use an epistemology, that knowledge comes only from external observation and rational inquiry, to take mankind to materialism. But there is no reality beyond material reality. And then you apply that to political thought. And so out of philosophical materialism emerges a new political philosophy. What does it say?
Jahiliyyah is a condition that pervades everything and everybody. It's even infected our powers of imagination. We don't even know that we're sick, that we now worship materialism and the self and individual truths over the real truths. So it's an incredible sense of epic confrontation where Islam is being assaulted on all fronts, from within, from without, culturally, militarily, economically, politically.
Since there is no reality beyond material reality, we can no longer collectively recognize sovereignty up there, so sovereignty must now be relocated down here. The people are now sovereign, no longer the God of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And the people constitute the state, and they locate sovereignty in the state.
God created people. We the people got together 200 years ago and created a state government. All of those states got together and created a federal government. And then the federal government created a corporate federal government. Notice it's all capital letters. The corporate federal government created a corporate state government. And one of these two, somewhere in here, created persons with all capital letters. This would be Kent Hovind with all capital letters. This is not me.
Not only is the state sovereign, but the authority of the state is supreme. And it is the state which now makes law. And the law of the state is the highest law, the supreme law. But more than that, the God of Abraham alayhi salam could make something haram. But we, the state, can change that and make it halal, meaning legalize it.
I can bring myself from here all the way down and submit myself under these corporations. The state government can tell their person, you must wear a seatbelt when you drive your car. They can tell this person, you must file an income tax form. You must get a Social Security number, you must get a driver's license, you must get a birth certificate, etc., etc. And they have the right to tell that to this person.
When Fir'aun declared, and of course everyone knows what Fir'aun said, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى, I am the one who is sovereign. I possess sovereignty. That was shirk. When he declared, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى, I am the one who possesses supreme authority, that was shirk. When he declared, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى, my law is the supreme law in the land of Egypt, that was shirk. And Allah punished him with terrible punishment for his shirk. When they declared in Articles 24 and 25 of the Charter of the United Nations Organization that the Security Council of the United Nations is vested with supreme authority in the world in all matters pertaining to international peace and security. That was shirk. Surah At-Tawbah of the Quran. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله. They took their priests and their rabbis as arbab, lords and gods beside Allah. وَالْمَسِيحَ ابْنَ مَرْيَمَ, and they did the same thing with the Messiah, the son of Mary. وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا يَعْبُدُوا إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا, but they had not been commanded other than to worship one God. La ilaha illahu, there is no God beside him. Subhanahu, glory be to him. Amma yushrikun. Far removed is he from this act of shirk, taking your priests and your rabbis as gods and lords beside Allah. Shirk, says Allah. A man came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, O Messenger of Allah, but the Christians do not worship their priests, and the Jews do not worship their rabbis. How could Allah say so? To which the Prophet ﷺ replied, and he said, did they not make halal what Allah had made haram? That is their shirk.
Islam commands that sovereignty for a nation is only for the laws of Allah, and that the nation does not depend on anyone else for its security. It also commands that it is for the Muslims to appoint a just ruler, and that the affairs of the people are the ruler's primary concern.
If the priest and the rabbi make halal what Allah made haram, and that is shirk, then if the government does the same thing, would it not be shirk? In 1897, Europeans who dressed up themselves in the clothing of Jews, remember they are Europeans who are parading as Jews, okay? They're called European Jews, but they're essentially Europeans. Judaism is only a camouflage. These people established the Zionist movement.
The Zionist movement was a European movement. I mean, those people spoke the same language. They came from the same culture. They were more sophisticated. They knew how to move and to which people to speak and how to negotiate with the British elite and other elites in the world.
Hungarian-born Theodor Herzl is the founder of political Zionism. The solution he put forward in 1896 in a radical book entitled The Jewish State was for the Jews to have their own territory, a territory in which they would no longer be the minority and could run their own affairs. A small community of Jews, numbering around 25,000, were already present in Palestine at this time. For centuries, they had lived alongside the majority Arab population peacefully, under the religiously tolerant Ottoman regime. But the sophisticated European newcomers, soon to be known as Zionists, had little in common with the indigenous people of Palestine, not least their fellow Jews.
Zionism was a nation-state ideology which aimed at the foundation of an independent Jewish state. The reason for this depended on the colonialist and social Darwinist theories which dominated 19th century Europe. According to these theories, the industrialized nations of the West had the right to colonize less developed nations. This was envisioned as a natural result of the concept of the struggle for survival between nations predicted by Darwinism. The Jews who put forward the idea of Zionism approved of this 19th century European error and constructed their own ideologies in the light of it.
This is a European creation. It didn't come out of the world of Islam. Oh no.
Judaism, a divine religion, has become a vehicle for Zionism, a worldly ideology. The problem is not Judaism and the Jews, but rather Zionism and the Zionists. The relationship between Zionism and Judaism has never been a realistic one. Those who put forward the ideology of Zionism were people who had nothing to do with religion. Max Nordau, the second important movement leader after Herzl, was a confirmed atheist.
Centuries before this, they had struck at Europe. And over a period of almost 300 to 400 years, they had transformed Europe from a civilization based on faith in Christianity to a new, essentially godless civilization. Having done that, they are now ready to strike when they create the Zionist movement.
I'm a witness. I know the Arabs are very good, no problem till the Zionist movement starts. My grandmother told me, before the Zionist movement starts, they babysitting each other, the kids. They bar off and watch each other like brothers, like brothers. The idea of the Zionists to take away the land from the Palestinians and the Arabs is starting the whole fighting. Not Arabs the problem, not Jews the problem, not Judaism, not Muslim, only Zionism.
Zionist Jews actually had a design on the land of Palestine, the idea of creating a homeland for Jews in the land of Palestine. And this is really the beginning of the conflict.
We have been living there hundreds of years together in harmony and peace, total harmony with the population, the indigenous Palestinian population, which was a mixture mainly of Muslims. The Jewish was definitely a small minority, but mainly it was Muslims and Christians who were there. Zionists, being that they wanted to sell their new concept, which around 100 years ago, they came to the Jewish people and they said, hey, you're hoping for the days of the Messiah. We're ushering this in. We're bringing this in. We're going to take you back to the land. Just they left out God out of this equation. They took this physical concept, and they, like I say, it's conflict. If you study this and understand this, you understand how it is totally contradictory to what Judaism is.
Let's define terms. What is a Jew? If you look back in your Old Testament, your Bible, there was 12 Hebrew tribes. The 10 northern tribes were called the house of Israel. The 2 southern tribes were called Benjamin and Judah. More properly pronounced Judah, because we didn't get the harder sound to the J until about 200 years ago. So this is what I would call real Jews, people from the tribe of Judah. And when we start talking about the New World Order, we are not talking about these people at all. We're talking about these Khazar warriors that only pretended to embrace Judaism. And so today, we find that about 92% of the people who claim to be Jews really aren't. They don't have a drop of Semitic blood in their veins. They are Khazar warriors with a new bent on life and a goal to conquer.
The stage was now set. The countdown has begun for the Jews to strike after waiting for almost 2,000 years. They are now ready to strike to achieve their long-held objective of bringing back the Golden Age. the European Jew gets a windfall. A massive amount of wealth now comes his way. How? The hadith was that the earth would yield up its treasures to Dajjal. A child was playing, a black child, was playing in a village in South Africa. And this child, in the middle of the 19th century, found a big stone, glittering stone. Child took it home, showed it to the parents. Parents took it to the chief of the tribe. Chief of the tribe took it to the white commissioner. White commissioner sent it to Cape Town or Johannesburg, one of these places, to have it examined, and promptly came the reply that this was a huge diamond. You think that happened by accident? You're living in Disneyland. No, the stage was now set when the diamond was discovered. And so now the Southern African region becomes a cluster of diamond and gold mines. One mine in particular becomes the most famous one of all. 3 months ago, I stood myself at that mine. It was the biggest man-made hole in the world, in a town called Kimberley. You heard about Kimberley diamonds. Yeah. When the diamonds were discovered at Kimberley and in the surrounding areas, it was the biggest discovery of diamonds in history.
Its history begins at Kimberley, South Africa in 1871. Until that year, mines had been few and diamonds truly rare, mostly from India and Brazil. But the Kimberley find was huge.
From this, the largest man-made hole in the world, over 100 million pounds worth of diamonds have been recovered.
Among those who rushed to make their fortunes were 2 young Englishmen.
Charles Donnell Rudd, my great-grandfather, and Cecil Rhodes met here in October 1871. They were early in the rush here, and they would have found an anthill, a mining camp, and as Rhodes described it, as Stilton cheese, as the claim holders dug down into this enormous diamondiferous kimberlite pipe.
What the Jews did, using an Englishman who was not a Jew, Cecil John Rhodes, using him as the front man. They always use a front man, but they stood behind him, and they were able to manipulate the situation and gain control of the diamonds. The De Beers Consolidated Diamond Company emerged and taking control of the diamonds. And the Rothschild family in Europe finances now the mining operations. And the bulk of the wealth which now emerges out of South Africa land up in the hands of the Jews.
And by 1880, he had amalgamated all the claim holders on his mine, the De Beers mine. And that began the amalgamation of all the diamond mines, and the formation of De Beers Consolidated Mines began in 1888.
What Cecil Rhodes had launched was a diamond cartel. It was based on an earlier French scheme to monopolize copper, buying up mines, restricting supply, and raising prices. From its first headquarters in Kimberley, De Beers bought out almost every other large mine in South Africa.
In 1914, the Kimberley mine was closed down. because it had yielded all that it could yield. The rest that now remained was just chicken feed. So they closed it down in 1940. When I went to that diamond mine in Kimberley, there were wheelbarrows filled with plastic cubes. To show you, give you an estimate of how many diamonds came out of this diamond mine. There were 5 huge barrows filled, brim, heaping with these plastic cubes. That's how many diamonds they got. And these were sold in the market, the international market, at the premium price because they cornered the market through the consolidated De Beers to establish a monopoly to ensure that the price would not come down.
Because it is a virtual monopoly, De Beers cannot operate legally in the United States. All site holders must travel here to buy their rough gems, to a building known only as 17 Charterhouse Street.
What makes this cartel different is it's controlled by a single company, a single commercial organization, and that's De Beers. And De Beers itself is controlled by another South African company, Anglo-American. Interestingly, Anglo-American is controlled by De Beers. And that interlocking ownership is what allows one small family company, E. Oppenheimers and Sons, who own just a small shareholding in Anglo-American, to control the whole edifice.
The European Jew now had amassed the maximum wealth he could amass at that period of time. This is just about 17 years after the Zionist movement was established. Within these 17 years, Dajjal had struck and had delivered to the European Jew this massive windfall of wealth. And so now they are ready, in 1914, to move to the next stage. To destroy the Khilafah, you'll have to destroy the Ottoman Empire. And you cannot destroy the Ottoman Empire with 5,000 Jews in an army. You need a world war to destroy the Ottoman Empire. That's a tall order. So what you do is you plan a conspiracy. And you stay behind so that your fingerprints are not in the crime. In other words, you plan a September the 11th. Huh? In the summer of 1914, there were 6 major powers in Europe. And there was one dark horse across the Atlantic. No one knew how fast it could run because it had never run in a race so far. One dark horse across the Atlantic. And 6 major powers in Europe. They were number 1, Russia, France, Britain, Germany, Austria, Hungary. That's 5. What's number 6? Ottoman Islamic Empire. These are the 6 major powers.
For the Ottoman Empire under Sultan Muhammad V was in alliance with Britain's much-feared rival, Germany. Together with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, these countries made up the Central Powers, and pitted against them were the 3 allies, Britain, France, and Russia.
The attack took place in the summer of 1914 when the Grand Duke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo. They left footprints which led to Russia. And so Austria-Hungary had no option but to declare war on Russia. But Britain and France already had a treaty, a defense treaty with Russia. And so Britain and France now had to declare war in favor of Russia against Austria-Hungary. But Germany has the same racial ties with Austria-Hungary, so Germany is now forced to enter the war on the side of Austria-Hungary. So they have succeeded. Whoever planned that assassination has succeeded in bringing all these powers now in Europe into a state of war. All that is left now is Ottoman Islamic Empire.
Treaties, alliances, ententes, everything seems conveniently arranged, permanently settled. And then, June 28, 1914, the heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, is assassinated at Sarajevo in the Balkans.
The Khalifa in Istanbul does not want to enter the war. He knows how weak the Ottoman army is in terms of military technology. But through internal intrigue within Istanbul, the Ottoman Empire is forced into the war, and a Russian ship in the Bosphorus is used as a pretext.
Ey Müslümanlar! Biliniz ki devletimiz İslamiyet'in adı ve canı olan Moskov, İngiliz ve Fransız hükümetleriyle muharip bulunuyor. Emir-ül-Mü'minin Hazretleri sizi cihada davet ediyor.
Once the war started, that massive wealth which the Jews had accumulated is now going to be used strategically for the purpose of influencing the direction of the war to get the prize that the Jews want. What is that prize? To destroy the Ottoman Islamic Empire, dismantle it, and to cut off the head of Islam, namely destroy the Khilafah. That's the prize they're after. The next prize is to liberate the Holy Land and to get the Holy Land for themselves. German submarines had surrounded and marooned the island of Britain. The French government had fallen, and Germany had occupied France, and Britain was on her knees.
When the enemy finally withdrew, Constantinople was decorated from one end to the other. At night, the minarets were lit up with oil lamps. Everyone was full of joy. Pale faces began to smile. Constantinople came back to life.
This is the moment that the Jews were waiting for. Now the Czech is going to talk. It's called financial diplomacy. The Jews, this is the German Jews, went to the British government and said, let's make a deal. Let's make a deal. We will intervene in the war with massive financial assistance to you. Massive. And we will bring that dark horse into the race. But that dark horse didn't want to come into the race. American public opinion was overwhelmingly against involvement in the war. But when the Jews went to the British government and said, let's make a deal, the British government said, deal.
They were having trouble. See, Germany was already winning. And they didn't like the idea at all. And so these characters went over to the King of England and said to the King of England, now, you don't have to surrender to Germany. If we can bring America in on your side, if we can cause America to start fighting your battles for you, would you support a homeland in Palestine for us? And the King of England was, what do I do? Do I surrender, or do I agree to let somebody else have that home? Oh, yeah, we'll support that. So in November of 1917, the King of England sent a letter called the Balfour Declaration to Lord Rothschild, whom he called the most eminent Jew.
The Balfour Declaration was a commitment that the British made to the Zionist movement during the fighting of the First World War, wherein Britain undertook to establish a Jewish national home. So the original commitment is in November 1917, when the British promise the Zionist organization that they would support the creation of a Jewish national home if they win the war.
The diamonds of Kimberley began to roll, and Jewish money now enters into the war in a massive way. If you want to destroy the Khilafah, okay, you have to make sure that it cannot be restored. How can you take the entire world of Islam with so many ulama and ensure that not only is the Khilafah destroyed, but it cannot be restored? That's a tall order. The answer is, you not only have to liberate the Haramain from the control of the Khalifa in Istanbul, but you have to put it in the control of those who will not themselves claim the Khilafah and will not allow anyone else to claim the Khilafah. And so long as these people keep control of the Haramain and the Hajj, the Khilafah can never be restored. Simple, isn't it? It is in 1916 that Jassasa went to work with British spies in Arabia. Lawrence of Arabia, of course, is the most well-known of them. These British spies were sent into Arabia, posing as Muslims. And they went to two actors in Arabia, two. One was Sharif Hussein, Sharif al-Hussein, who was appointed by the Khalifa in Istanbul as the Sharif of the Hijaz, Mecca and Medina. So when the British spies went to Hussein, they offered him the moon. They offered him the moon. We will liberate the land of the hated Ottoman Turks, and we will give you independence and freedom, and you will now become the king of the Arabs. Remember, Britain is not talking about Khilafah. No, we'll make you the king of the Arabs. And we also prepared to offer you a little, you know what, just £7 million. Huh? £7 million at that time is what Bill Gates has now. Sharif Hussein, the great-great-grandfather of Abdullah in Jordan now, then betrayed the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, betrayed 1400 years of history of this ummah, violated the plain and clear command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran in Surah Al-Ma'idah, in which He commanded us, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tattakhidhu al-yahuda wal-nasara awliya. Do not take the Jews and do not take the Christians as your awliya. Do not establish an alliance with them in which you become dependent upon them and subservient to them. Do not do that, says Allah. بَعْدُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. They are protecting friends of each other. وَمَنْ يَتَوَلَّهُمْ مِنْكُمْ فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. Whosoever from amongst you turn to them for that kind of an alliance, you no longer belong to this ummah, you've now joined them. Inna Allah la yahdi al-qawm al-zalimin. Surely Allah will never provide guidance for a people who commit such an atrocious act of wrongdoing. And this is precisely what Sharif Hussein did, and what all his descendants from that day to this day have been doing. Sharif Hussein now accepts 7 million sterling pounds and enters into a military alliance with Britain and declares himself independent of the Ottoman Khalifa.
The British and French saw their opportunity to break the Ottoman Empire and control Ottoman lands. A conspiracy took place that was to betray the Arabs and shape modern Arab history. In the middle of the First World War, a secret European agreement known as Sykes-Picot preempted the fall of the Ottomans by dividing the areas of their eastern Mediterranean empire. Sharif Hussein ibn Ali of Mecca appeared to be the answer. He was from the Quraysh clan, and he was custodian of the holy places of Islam, Mecca and Medina. A royal descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, and the governor of the Hijaz region of Arabia, he had both the religious and political qualifications. Sharif Hussein and his sons were about to become leading figures of the Arab independence movement.
Once the Khilafah in Istanbul had lost control of Mecca and Medina, had lost control of the Haramain, had lost control of the Hajj, you pull the carpet, you pull the rug from underneath the feet of the Khalifa. His Khilafah is now losing legitimacy.
Believing that with British support he would be able to break Ottoman rule, Sharif Hussein began to plan his revolt. The nationalists began to plan for a new government to ensure that they would share power with Hussein, and the British began to plan how to control the Arabs. On the 10th of June 1916, Sharif Hussein declared a war of independence by symbolically firing a rifle at the Turkish barracks in Mecca. The Great Arab Revolt had begun.
The British spies then went to the second actor in the Arabian Peninsula. I mean, Britain has a PhD in deception. Abdulaziz ibn Saud did not control the Hijaz, so he couldn't command the check for £7 million. Huh? He had to be content with something less than that. So what the British offered to him was, if you would sign the same kind of agreement with us and violate the specific command in the Quran and betray Allah and His Messenger and betray the Ummah, if you will do that, we pay you £5,000 a month. Would you accept that? Abdulaziz says yes. Yes. And in 1916, Abdulaziz ibn Saud signed an agreement with Britain. Yes. Which made of him a military ally of Britain, subservient to Britain. But when the Ikhwan, who were his military force, questioned him, how can you sign this agreement with Britain? And how can you accept this money from Britain, £5,000 a month? Abdulaziz ibn Saud says, this is jizya. Jizya is what they pay to me because I control them. It was dust in their eyes and they swallowed it. And so Abdulaziz ibn Saud got away with it. Massive betrayal, and a very dangerous plan is now in place. So Britain now has to create a Turkish general who would appear to the Turkish people as a savior who has come down from the heavens with his hands resting on the wings of angels to save the Turkish people. And so at a place called Gallipoli, a man named Mustafa Kemal inflicts a defeat on the ruling state in the world, Britain, and immediately climbs the ladder to become the hero of all heroes in Turkish history. Very convenient, isn't it?
The Turks contained the Anzac breakout at the Cove. Gallipoli made a hero out of Mustafa Kemal. Within 8 years he became his country's leader, earning the name Ataturk, father of the Turks.
And a British army under General Allenby, with many Arabs and Punjabi Muslims fighting faithfully under his control, attacked the Turkish garrison which was defending Jerusalem, defeated it, and liberated the Holy Land. This was a joyous day for the Jews, because now the countdown is really moving forward, and the golden age is coming back. By 1919, the Ottoman Empire was in shambles, falling apart.
Many of the new states carved out of the Ottoman Empire turned their backs on it and each other. But more than successor states were involved. Britain and France took over the Middle East after World War I, and Soviet communism took over most of the Balkans after World War II. While restructuring the societies under their control, these 20th century occupiers did what they could to erase the Ottoman legacy.
And from this emerged now the Turkish Republic, which replaces the Ottoman Islamic State. Mustafa Kemal now takes over. He is in fact de facto ruler over the Ottoman Empire, and the Khalifa is just a piece of furniture.
He forced foreign invaders out of the Ottoman heartland and declared the independent Republic of Turkey. Kemal, later known as Ataturk, turned his back on the Ottoman past and its capital, Constantinople, and built a new capital, inland, at Ankara.
Sharif al-Hussein realized that he was in grave danger now. So long as there was a Khalifa in Istanbul, the British needed him. But now that the Caliphate was destroyed, abolished, Sharif al-Hussein now realizes the plan. He says, oh my gosh, they're going to send Abdulaziz ibn Saud to cut my throat now.
Sharif Hussein was also betrayed in his own part of the world, where the British had promised the Sauds to take over Najd and Hijaz. So not only he was not given an Arab kingdom, but his autonomous rule that was a tradition and accepted by the Ottomans, he was lost to the tribal coalition of the Sauds, yes, with British help, and he spent his last days in Cyprus, of all places.
They had to make the trip to Riyadh to meet, what's his name? Abdulaziz ibn Saud, correct name? Of course it's the correct name. Why are you afraid to mention it? And then he will attack and take control of the Haramain. And when once he does that, he won't make the mistake of ever claiming the Khilafah for himself. And he will never allow anyone else to claim the Khilafah, because no one else can take the control of the Hijaz and the Haramain from them, because they are supported by Britain. And so goodbye to the Khilafah. It's gone. It can never be restored. Never, never, never be restored. So long as Britain and the United States of America underwrite the security of the Saudi state, you can never, never, never restore the Khilafah.
With the Ikhwan, Ibn Saud was able to conquer an area greater than Western Europe. Ibn Saud was even more determined to complete his conquest. In 1926, he took possession of Mecca and Medina, the two holiest sites in Islam. This provided him with an important source of revenue, fees from the annual pilgrimage to Mecca called the Hajj.
He charged Muslims to make the Hajj to Mecca. They had to pay a fee to be allowed into Saudi Arabia, and that's how he lived, frugally.
By 1932, Ibn Saud had conquered the vast territory between the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. He would name it after his family, Saudi Arabia, and proclaim himself king.
Can Mullah Umar have been recognized as the Khalifa? No, why not? Because when the Hajj comes, Amir al-Mu'mineen Mullah Umar will have to apply for a Saudi visa to perform the Hajj. Huh? And if the Saudis reject the visa, The Khalifa can't perform the Hajj. But Mustafa Kemal said, the Turkish people love their Khalifa. So if Europe could have a pope, well, why can't we have a pope too? This was simplistic thinking on the part of Mustafa Kemal. If the Europeans could have a pope, well, so too can we. So the new Turkish government of Mustafa Kemal decided to take the Khilafah and remove from it all political authority and make the Khalifa the equivalent of the Pope. This was 1922. And things were going fine for him. Turkish people were happy. Khilafah is still there. And the leadership of the revolution in Turkey were very happy because we have a secular state now, modeled after the European state. Britain demanded of Mustafa Kemal that he must abolish the Khilafah. The demand came from Britain. And on the 3rd of March 1924, the Turkish Republic abolished the Khilafah. The question we have to ask is, why did they do it when there was no need to do it? Nothing. It represented no threat whatsoever to the secular Turkish Republic. The answer for the abolition of the Khilafah on the 3rd of March 1924 is located in a place called India. But even the Indian scholars of Islam are not aware of it. Even they are not aware of it. When the attack on the Khilafah was taking place in the 1916, 17, 18 period, then Indian ulama, at that time the Indian Muslim community was one of the most influential Muslim communities in the world. And the Indian Muslim community was led by leaders who knew Islam and lived Islam. Men like Maulana Muhammad Ali Jawhar, Maulana Shaukat Ali, Maulana Sayyid Sulaiman Nadwi, Mufti Kifayatullah, men who knew Islam and lived Islam. And they wanted to get rid of British imperial rule in India. So that when they got rid of the British, they could restore Islamic rule over Muslims. That's all they wanted. And so they established a movement which they call the Khilafat movement, Harakatul Khilafah, the Khilafat movement. When they established the Khilafat movement and it began to mobilize the Muslim masses, the body which was sleeping is now waking up for revolutionary struggle to preserve the Khilafah in Istanbul. We also want the Hindus, we want to get rid of the British, and we want to restore Hindu rule over the Hindus. So there's a conversion of interest here. So Gandhi, who later became known as Mahatma Gandhi, Gandhi approached the leadership of the Khilafat movement and he said to them, listen, the same thing you want, the same thing I want. So why don't we join forces? Will you allow me to join the Khilafat movement? This constituted the most dangerous of all threats that Western civilization have ever experienced in its entire period of colonization of mankind. Because the Western objective was to demolish every existing state structure in the world and replace it with the secular state. So that eventually the secular state could be brought under the umbrella of a League of Nations and eventually a United Nations, And this would be political globalization at work. Between 1920 and 1924, the Khilafat movement was building up steam at an alarming rate. And by 1924, the British had calculated, we have to get rid of this Khilafat movement. And the only way we can think of now is to abolish the Khilafat. And so they put the pressure on Mustafa Kemal. As soon as the Khilafat was abolished, the Khilafat movement in India began to lose steam.
In 1918, Maulana Muhammad Ali Jauhar and Maulana Shaukat Ali launched the Khilafat movement to protect the Ottoman Empire. Gandhi linked the issue of Swaraj with the Khilafat issue to associate Hindus with the movement. Muslims and Hindus worked side by side to boycott British goods and British law. Large protest rallies were organized throughout the subcontinent. In 1922, when the movement was at its climax, Gandhi called it off, making the excuse that some national volunteers were responsible for the murder of 21 policemen in the Chora Chori incident.
In that same year, the secularly minded, the brown-skinned Englishmen parading as Muslims, of whom the prince of them all was the grandfather of the present Aga Khan, Karim Aga Khan's grandfather. They now restore an organization called the All India Muslim League. The All India Muslim League is led by men who don't know Islam and don't live Islam. And these are the people who now wage a struggle for the liberation of the Muslims from British rule to be replaced, not with rule of Islam, oh no, but rather by the rule of the secular Republic of Pakistan and the secular Republic of India, so that Pakistan and India could be embraced within the community of secular nation states.
On June 3rd, Mountbatten secured the consent of the Congress and the League leaders to the British government plan of setting up 2 independent dominions on August 15th, 1947. The Congress Working Committee disliked the partition of India, but it could not let India bleed continuously, and accepted the plan. Gandhi was steadfastly opposed to the division of India, and yet he urged the members to support the decision with full faith in their leaders. On August 15th, the appointed day, people gathered to welcome the dawn of a new age and witness the peaceful transfer of power. Lord Mountbatten became the first Governor-General of the Dominion by the will of the sovereign people of India. The first session of the All India Congress Committee after the attainment of freedom declared its faith. Our aim has been to develop this great country as a democratic, secular state. Values were changing fast under the impact of events.
But of course you had to put a little red herring to fool the people. So you have to make it appear as though Pakistan is going to emerge as an Islamic state, but that's just dust in their eyes, to fool those who see with only one eye.
Citizens of Pakistan, it is with feelings of greatest happiness and emotion that I send you my greeting. August the 15th is the birthday of the independent and sovereign state of Pakistan. It marks the fulfillment of the destiny of the Muslim nation, which has made great sacrifices in the past few years to have its homeland. We stand by the United Nations Charter and will gladly make our full contribution to peace and prosperity of the world. Let us on this day humbly thank God for His bounty and pray that we might be able to prove that we are worthy of it. As loyal citizens of Pakistan, they have nothing to fear. To the states beyond our borders, we send our greetings and assure them that Pakistan will extend to them its most friendly cooperation in preserving peace.
In April of 1924, Al-Azhar University had responded to the Turkish abolition of the Khilafah. What did they do? Al-Azhar University declared that this was bid'ah and haram to abolish the Khilafah. And therefore we must respond to it. And the response of Al-Azhar is that we must have a mu'tamar, a conference, which would meet and which would appoint a new Khalifa. As soon as Al-Azhar issued this proclamation, you could see how Britain was trembling. The British government can't digest their food now. They've got to plan some counter strategy. So Britain puts pressure on King Fuad. And King Fuad is now putting pressure on Al-Azhar to hold back on this conference. So for 2 years the conference can't take place. 2 years because of British pressure. The conference finally takes place in June, July of 1926. But Britain uses another counter strategy. She gets Abdulaziz ibn Saud in Mecca to also convene a conference of the world of Islam in Mecca at the time of the Hajj. Massive intervention in the affairs of the world of Islam to ensure that the Cairo conference does not succeed in winning a representative gathering, and that the Mecca conference gets all the Muslims attending it. And they succeeded. The Cairo conference, organized by Al-Azhar University, becomes an essentially Arab conference. The conference met. The conference decided that the Khilafah was an essential part of the deen, that it was bid'ah and haram to abolish it, that the Khilafah must be restored, but we don't know how to do it. So let's go back home and come back after 1 year. But in Mecca, you had the most successful representation of the entire world of Islam, because Britain really went to work on it. This conference is now convened, but strangely, for the Wahhabi movement. Strangely for the Wahhabi movement, which is a religious movement, which declares that it is bringing back the original Islam and removing all the extraneous things which had been added and cutting out all the shirk. So this is the real Islam. Well, then how come you don't even have the subject of the Khilafah in your agenda for your conference? We asked the Wahhabi movement, give us an answer. There is no answer.
The Ikhwan, or Muslim Brothers, were renowned warriors, light and mobile and extremely courageous. They were also fervent Wahhabi Islamic Puritans. The Wahhabis took their name from an 18th century Islamic preacher, Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. Wahhab was first to see the value in forging an alliance with the able tribesmen of the Al Saud family in order to help spread his austere version of Islam.
The Ikhwan were an important fighting force that supported the expansion of Ibn Saud. They had this vision that they propagated true Islam in its purest form. So anything they encountered that differed from that vision was regarded as objectionable.
Ibn Saud's other means of ensuring loyalty were insisting that those he conquered become devout followers of the strict Wahhabi Islamic sect.
The strictest section of Sunni Islam. Until the 30s and 40s, they didn't wear silk, they didn't have flowers in their gardens, they would never use perfume. They were Puritan, they were desert people, and they loved him.
The answer is that the Wahhabi-Saudi alliance is now perpetrating a gigantic, a massive betrayal of Islam in abandoning the Khilafah.
To one side of the Crown Prince sit leading Wahhabi clerics, guardians of tradition who habitually resist change. On the Crown Prince's other side are the royal family and its retainers. Presumably, the two groups are partners in power.
Subject of the Khilafah is not even on the agenda of the conference. Instead, Abdulaziz ibn Saud approaches the conference twice, himself in person, and he asks the conference to recognize him as Al-Malik. That his rule should be recognized over the Hijaz. When the conference had heard His Majesty the King on both occasions, and the conference is now sitting down to discuss the matter, shall we recognize Saudi Wahhabi rule over the Hijaz? The leader of the Indian Muslim delegation jumped up to speak first. He spoke first. His name was Maulana Muhammad Ali Jawhar. He got up and he told the king, get lost. We'll never do that. As soon as the leadership of the Indian Muslim delegation had established its position of rejecting the claim of the Saudi Wahhabi leadership for sovereignty and control over the Hijaz, the rest of the delegates couldn't say, That was the power of a man who knew Islam and lived Islam. And so the conference ended without giving to the Saudi Wahhabi rule over the Hijaz recognition.
The Ottoman rule over Mecca and Medina ended in the early years of the 20th century with the abolishment of the Caliphate institution. The future of the two holy cities was then transferred to the Saudi monarchy. The Saudi monarchy has become the legitimate guardian of the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. One of its responsibilities is to hold an official ceremony of cleaning the Kaaba and its vicinity. The ritual is held annually before the coming of the Hajj season.
In 1924, October, Abdulaziz ibn Saud makes a proclamation, and they're going to hate me for revealing this to you, because nobody remembers it now. The proclamation which he makes is that this land belongs to the entire Ummah. This land belongs to the entire Ummah. I wonder how a Pakistani or a Bengali Muslim will feel when he hears that, and he's been rounded up like dogs, stray dogs, and put on trucks because he's overstayed his visa, while white-skinned Americans and British are treated like princes in the Holy Land. How will a Pakistani or Indian or Bangladeshi feel? This land belongs to the entire Ummah. And it is for the Ummah, not for Abdulaziz ibn Saud, for the Ummah to establish the government which will rule over this land. That is his proclamation in 1924.
كلمتنا وتوحيد شؤوننا وحفظ جامعتنا فليس لنا جامعة نجتمع عليها إلا جامعة الكتاب.
If Abdulaziz were to stay in power, he had to destroy the Ikhwan. But how could he, the defender of Islam, justify going to war against his Muslim fighters? His way out was to win over the religious establishment, the ulama, who were regarded as the moral guardians of the realm.
From that moment, they actually changed their role, the ulama, and they became almost like a force to be used to sanction politics. And that was the crucial moment in 1927.
With the ulama's consent, Abdulaziz crushed the Ikhwan. To unite the kingdom, King Abdulaziz married a daughter of every tribal chief in his realm and produced 45 legitimate sons. Every Saudi king since has been a son of Abdulaziz. How many daughters he produced is unknown. They are not counted. In 1933, the first foreign oil prospectors started arriving in the kingdom. King Abdulaziz did not care who got the concession, as long as they paid the money up front. For President Franklin Roosevelt, oil was an American national security priority, but it was the security of the Saudi kingdom that was at the forefront of King Abdulaziz's concerns. He requested U.S. military assistance and training, and they agreed to construct the Dahran military base. In return, the king guaranteed that the U.S. would always have secure access to Saudi oil.
And all the oil that Dajjal discovered underneath the soil belongs to them. They own it. So what about Abdulaziz ibn Saud's proclamation that this entire land belongs to the world of Islam? That's forgotten. That's why they hate me for reminding you of these things.
Since Gamal Abdel Nasser's overthrow of the King of Egypt in 1952, the balance of power in the region had changed. Nasser aligned himself with the Soviet Union and proclaimed himself a socialist and pan-Arabist. For both Saudi Arabia and America, this was a threat. Nasser wanted Saudi oil under his control, saying it belonged to all Arab peoples. The Americans moved to shore up support for King Saud.
Saudi Arabia is absolutely a linchpin, a key to our relationship in the whole area.
King Saud's drinking was kept quiet in part because the king was an important asset for the Americans.
The Eisenhower administration had the idea that perhaps King Saud could be built up in a political fashion that might make him a contender with Nasser in terms of leadership in the Arab world.
In exchange for our free use of the Dahran airfield, they wanted all kinds of materials. They wanted tanks, for one thing, and they wanted training, and they wanted planes, and they wanted anything we would give them.
You cannot restore the Khilafah unless and until you can liberate the Hijaz, Makkah and Medina. You can't do that when the Hijaz, the security of the Hijaz is underwritten by Uncle Sam.
The royal family was scared of the same thing happening to them that happened to the Shah, and namely that the royal family or the Saudi system would be overthrown.
On November 20th, 1979, several hundred Islamic radicals took over the holiest of the Islamic holy places, the mosque at Mecca. After an 18-day standoff, the Saudis, with fatwa in hand, routed the militants. 120 soldiers died. The leader of the insurgents, Juhayman al-Utaiba, was a direct descendant of the Ikhwan, the Bedouin warriors who had fought for and then rebelled against King Abdulaziz. Juhayman and 62 others were beheaded. Saudi leaders lost credibility and respect, especially among religious conservatives.
They're so corrupt in every sense, in Islamic sense, in financial sense, in administrative sense, in every sense, that no way they can reform and go back and become faithful to the country, let alone faithful to Islam.
We killed the extremists of 1979, but later on, like
few months after we killed them, we adopted their ideology. We gave them what they wanted when they were alive. So in every level in our society, I'm talking about the educational system, I'm talking about the media discourse, I'm talking about the relationship between the government and the people, I'm talking about even the relationship between people and the people. We started competing on how to appear more conservative, just to protect our reputation and to protect sometimes our safety. We had to pretend we were something that we actually were not.
What is the replacement of the Khilafah?
The Europeans prepared to openly take control of the former Ottoman territories. The Arabs were once again under foreign domination. And for the first time, Arabs had to contend with national borders, which had never existed, even under Ottoman colonialism.
Beginning with the secular Republic of Turkey, and then an Iran which resembles a Shia republic, but essentially is a secular republic. And then the secular Republic of Pakistan, which of course has now become the American Republic of Pakistan. And then in 1933, the Republic of Saudi Arabia, but they're parading as a monarchy. But it's actually a secular state, because it has all the trappings of a secular state. A secular state has territorial sovereignty. The state of Saudi Arabia has territorial sovereignty. A secular state has citizenship. Once upon a time when I went to Mecca, I was Muslim. And the only difference between me and my fellow Muslim was resident in Mecca was that I was Musafir and he was Sakin. I am now a foreign national, and they are Saudis. When a Muslim pledges his allegiance to the modern secular state and to its constitution, which declares that Allah is no longer Al-Malik, no longer Al-Akbar, no longer Al-Hakam. The state is now Al-Malik, Al-Akbar, and Al-Hakam. And the state can make halal what Allah made haram. When a Muslim pledges his allegiance, you've got to do that to get citizenship. Oh yeah, can't get a US passport without pledging allegiance. When you do that, you commit shirk.
What does it take to be a citizen of the United States? Well, you have to qualify. Okay? What are the two qualifications? That's what it names, two qualifications in order to be a citizen. The first qualification is you have to either be born here or naturalized. The second qualification to be a citizen of the United States is you have to be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. See that word? Subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. That is the second requirement for being a citizen. You understand? Subject. The people are sovereign. They're not subject to anybody. At most, if you're one of the people of the United States, you are subject to your fellow sovereigns in the form of grand jury indictment and petite jury 100% conviction. Okay? That's a trial by the people, not a trial by the government.
The entire world of Islam is now embraced by the modern secular state.
मस्जिदें भी बनाते हैं, मस्जिदों की खिदमत करते हैं, वहाँ कालीन बिछाते हैं, वगैरह वगैरह। गोया कि कोई उनकी जिंदगी में जहां तक मुमकिन है गुनाह नहीं है, लेकिन वो एक कौम के फर्द है, एक मुल्क के शहरी है, उस मुल्क का निजाम बातिल है, उस मुल्क का निजाम तागूती है, अल्लाह से बगावत पर मबनी है। और ये पूरे आलम इस्लाम की बात कर रहा हूं, बाकी जो गैर मुस्लिम ममालिक हैं, गैर मुस्लिम अक्सरियत है, उनकी बात नहीं कर रहा। पूरा आलम इस्लाम निजाम क्या है? सेक्युलर है। अल्लाह की शरीयत कहीं नाफिज नहीं है, अल्लाह की हाकमियत की नफी है।
This is now the universal shirk that the Prophet ﷺ had prophesied. He said the time would come when shirk will be everywhere, it will be so difficult to recognize it. However, as difficult as it would be to recognize a black ant on a black stone on a dark night. So if you did not recognize it before this lecture, don't be surprised, but now you know.
معاهدة سيكلستيك وأسست على أن لا تقوم وحدة عربية بجميع الدول العربية. احنا لسه مستعمرين. ما في دولة مستقلة يعني إلا كل واحد تابع لدولة أجنبية.
الوحدة يوم أمسك بزمامها زعماء للأسف كلهم مشترين ومباعين لحكومات غربية. فقدنا الرابط الحقيقي.
This universal secular state is now used to embrace all of mankind, including the world of Islam, in political globalization.
It's often said that the hatreds of this post-Ottoman world are ancient hatreds. I would say that the differences are ancient differences, but the hatreds are new hatreds. The hatreds are clearly manufactured in the 19th and 20th centuries and perpetuated by contemporary political concerns.
The destruction of the Caliphate, or the Khilafah, was of the most devastating events in Islamic history. The lands were divided the Sharia made irrelevant, the Arabic language left unutilized, the call to prayer abandoned in places, the resources of the Muslims pillaged, and countless atrocities perpetrated against them. When one understands what the Khilafah stands for, is it any wonder that the enemies of Tawheed are still doing their utmost in ensuring the resumption of the Islamic way of life embodied in the Khilafah does not eventuate? Is it any wonder that they spend trillions sending their armies halfway across the world to gain a foothold in the Muslim lands? Is it any wonder that they spend billions on intelligence? Is it any wonder that plots are hatched to create division between Muslims themselves? And finally, is it any wonder that the greatest nation raised up for mankind has realized its obligation and calls for this system once again? Truly, the return of the Khilafah is only a matter of time.
The most monstrous betrayal of Islam ever committed in history, committed by those who control that state. And let it be clear that there are so many Salafi Muslims in Saudi Arabia, in prison, because they too are struggling for the same thing that I am struggling, to liberate that land. Let it be clear that there's a man like Sheikh Safar al-Hawali, who is at the forefront, intellectually, spiritually, and theoretically, at the forefront. I benefited from his thought. And so, do not remain with this sectarian conflict and describe that masjid, Salafi masjid, this one Sunni masjid, this one Indonesian masjid, that one Malay masjid. I thought the masjid was the house of Allah. Has it changed?
The House of Saud used the theology of the Wahhabi sect of Islam to create national unity. Saudi Arabia is still run largely by a coalition between the royal family and the religious establishment. That religious establishment is very resistant to exploring anything archaeologically before Islam, a period they see as characterized by moral chaos.
Well, that little question mark in the back of Bible is really what got me involved with this entire thing. What is that doing there?
I don't know why it's been ignored. I guess the tradition is so strong.
Yet in Saudi Arabia, we find something that doesn't belong there.
The world needs to know that this is not myth and legend, not allegory. This is real.
We began to look at it. It was written by Sir Richard Burton in the 1800s. He was an explorer of vast amounts of the former Ottoman Empire, including Arabia. And he had drawn a map in the back, and as we pulled that map out, that map had a beautiful rendition of the Gulf of Suez and the Gulf of Aqaba, Sinai Peninsula, but it also had just a little portion of this northwestern quadrant of Arabia, and it listed that land as M-A-D-Y-A-N.
He also mentions Jebel al-Lawz as being a potential site.
The mountain where Moses saw the glory of the God of the Hebrews, where he fell to his knees in fear before a burning bush, and where he received the stone tablets containing holy law etched by the finger of God.
If you look at satellite imagery, it gives a wide, clear area along the western side of the Sinai Peninsula, almost like a highway. They probably went through the Red Sea right at the tip of the Sinai Peninsula in a place called Sharm el-Sheikh.
The book of Exodus records that Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground.
The Bible says that they crossed through the Red Sea, and it was the mighty waters of the Red Sea. That's simple. We need to look there. The Bible says that Mount Sinai is in Arabia. Galatians 4:25 says, now Hagar stands for Mount Sinai in Arabia. The Bible says it's in the ancient land of Midian, where Moses met God on Mount Sinai. Why aren't we following the clues given us in Scripture?
No archaeologist ever has found a scintilla or a trace of anything at St. Catherine's. Nothing's been found there. Yet in Saudi Arabia, we find something that doesn't belong there. Egyptian artifacts in Saudi Arabia.
This is actual video footage of their remarkable find, smuggled out of Saudi Arabia at great risk. Bob and Larry move in closer to examine mysterious petroglyphs on the side of the altar, instantly recognizing their similarity to the ancient Egyptian deities Apis and Hathor.
If a golden calf were to have been put on the top, that scripture would not contradict itself. It would absolutely perfectly fit. And he would have placed it atop and said, in fact, these be thy gods, O Israel, which have led thee up out of the land of Egypt.
It says in chapter 24 of Exodus that Moses got up early, he erected 12 pillars, he built an altar there at the base of the mountain.
The Bible talks about this altar that Moses made at the foot of the mountain and established 12 stone pillars, and they did burnt offerings at this site. And it's at the foot of the mountain.
Angular shaped.
Angular shaped. It had 2 channels on it. We found these white stone pillars, about 22, 24 inches in diameter. They're kind of a white, soft, marble-ish type material. They would have stacked right on top of one another. Ancient Egyptian photographs show that this is a style of building a pillar-type formation.
When we get up there, the rocks are clearly black, just like a chalkboard black on the outside, and you break the rocks open and they're not black on the inside. And then as you come down the mountain, there's no more blackened rocks.
Though excited about their discoveries, Cornuke and Williams know they need to find at least one other distinguishing feature on the mountain, if this is the true Mount Sinai.
And to be the real Mount Sinai, you need to have a cave on that mountain. The Bible specifically talks about a cave on the mountain that Elijah visited.
It is dead front of the mountain. It was a lot higher than I thought it was. The entrance looks small. It's 15 feet high. It's a big cave. I was able to climb into it. It's about 20 feet deep. One of the things I did is when I was walking to the back of it, I swung around with my video camera, and the view was awe-inspiring. see the golden calf altar, the plain where the thousands of tents would have been located out there.
The bitter springs of Mara, the 70 palms of Elam, the 12 springs of Elam, they were like breadcrumbs leading you to a location. It was that simple. The greatest find around this mountain was the split rock discovery. This, to me, is the real nail in this whole thing that drives it home that this is the real Mount Sinai.
And we came up to a break in the rocks, and I looked over from the north looking due south, and both of us were just stunned. From a distance, it's big. When you're close to it, it is enormous. It's 4 stories tall. And I've often said that the miracle that would have happened there probably rivaled or surpassed the crossing of the Red Sea.
The Exodus account says that the people of Israel grumbled against Moses, saying, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?"
Your tongue feels like a piece of tar from a Texas highway when you're out in the desert. The sun is relentless. They would have cried out for water. And, of course, Moses heard their cries, petitioned God. Moses struck the rock, and it split right down the middle from top to bottom. The Bible literally says the water gushed from this.
I climbed up the backside to the very base of this rock, and right at the base of that split, it's deeply gouged. And the rock on either side, if you look straight up from the inside of that rock, it's really, really smooth, but it's pressure flaked. Big chunks of granite have been flaked from the bottom. And it's not a normal erosive pattern for granite. Granite generally from just wind and erosion will crack and flake off from the top down. This is coming up as though something came flying up and really gouged the rock. When that rock was split in two, a geyser erupted out of the top of it. It blew those 2 pieces of that rock apart.
It's very interesting. This part of the world gets a ½ an inch of rain every 10 years. And it's so arid and so dry. Yet this rock shows distinct evidence of water erosion. Not just a trickle, a burst of water flowing from it, washing out the whole mountainside, going down and washing all the sand that's down below it, creating an ancient lake bed down below.
The most graphic description would be found in Psalms. Thou didst cleave the rock in the wilderness, and the waters ran down as rivers. And that Hebrew word for clave means to split cleanly in two. There is no such candidate for any other site that has been investigated or is currently being investigated as Mount Sinai.
God handed down the 10 Commandments, written with His own finger. It was a law of love of God, and love of our fellow man.
The 11th century Europe was ruled by the Church, which held a firm grip on the hearts and minds of the people. This power enabled Pope Urban II to wage war on the Muslim Caliphate and crusade in what he called a War of the Cross, to recapture the land of Jerusalem. It had been under Muslim rule since the year 637, but in 1099 this rule was brought to a bloody and sudden end. 20 years after Jerusalem was taken, the Dome of the Rock was seized by a group of warrior monks calling themselves the Knights of the Temple of Solomon, or more simply, the Knights Templars. In Jerusalem, the Templars began to deviate further and further away from the practices of Christianity. They learned the secret arts of the Kabbalah, an ancient form of Jewish magic, along with its dark rites and rituals. In 1314, Pope Clement V declared all Templars as heretics to Christianity, ordering all their properties to be seized. Their leader, Jacques de Molay, was captured and burnt to the stake. In 1717, the Templars made their reappearance in Europe. They had grown in both number and strength, and were now ready to coin a new identity, free from their reputation of the past. And the name they chose for themselves was a name that would be known by many, but understood by a few. This new name, the Freemasons.
The Freemasons are an organization which have their roots in ancient Israel, Banu Israel from the earliest times.
This earth and humanity itself does indeed face a massive threat.
It is not the threat of global terrorism or the threat of war. It is not the threat of environmental disaster or global warming. It is something more sinister, something that lies within. Different people blame different groups or conspiracies for these problems. Club of Rome, the Bilderbergers, Freemasons, Bohemian Club. Some say Zionists or the Vatican conspiracy. Some say Skull and Bones, and the list goes on. Well, the truth is that all of the above sources are in fact involved, each in its own way, and each carries out specific tasks. All these organisations are interlinked to one controlling body at the top, now widely known as the Illuminati.
Freemasonry now has been hijacked by them, and they're using it as a front organization so that they can stand behind.
You can think of Zionism as like the special ops division of the Illuminati, which in turn has offshoots such as the Mossad and CIA. Organisations whose sole purpose is to undermine governments and create instability, and who control all global drug and human traffic trading, and who also control all other terrorist organisations down the food chain, such as Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda, by the way, is an organisation which is wholly invented and is nothing more than a database consisting of a list of names of mujahideen trained in terrorism by the CIA in the late 1970s. The words Al-Qaeda literally translate to the database in Arabic.
So you attack World Trade Center, but your fingerprints are not on the crime. You're behind. You attack the World Trade Center in 1991, and you put Sheikh Omar Abdurrahman behind bars, the blind sheikh. But the Jewish fingerprints are not on the crime.
9/11 missing links may be seen as an attack against Jews by some, but I think that it contains relevant and pertinent information concerning the true perpetrators of the 9/11 attacks.
You attack the U.S. mission in Tanzania, the U.S. mission in Kenya, Tanzania and Kenya, and you believe that we are blind. We know you did it. You attacked, but you blame Osama bin Laden for that.
All the world is a stage, and everything of importance that occurs on it is planned to happen that way. And it is through this Illuminati system of intertwining secret societies that the entire world is ultimately run.
And when you find out how all these people have been pulling together to foment so many of these things going on here, you should be forewarned. Because this is not just accidental history. This is conspiracy. People working together to do wrong. And by definition, a conspiracy is just two or more people planning in secret to do something wrong. And by that definition, there must be thousands, millions, maybe even billions of conspiracies going on all the time. But you mentioned something about what's going on. Oh, that's one of them conspiracy nuts. We've all been vilified by that label. Conspiracy nut is kind of like anti-Semite. It's just a buzzword to say they're onto us. They know who we are. They know what we're up to. Let's jump on them and vilify them, and that's the way they operate, through vilification. And if vilifying isn't enough, they'll trump up some charges. And if that's not enough, they send in the wet agents to spill some of your blood.
From the shadows, they have engineered every major war, revolution, and recession. They control everything you read, everything you hear, and everything you see. They have managed to indoctrinate an entire populace to their way of thinking and have infiltrated key positions in places of authority. And it is from the shadows that they have created a new political order, a new economic order, and more sinister, a new religious order. Their ultimate aim is total global domination, and they will stop at nothing to reach their goal. The goal that was outlined in a speech given by former President of the United States, George Bush.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order.
So then, who are the controllers and why? Why are they doing this to the human race?
When these people already control all the money and all the resources and already start wars and famines at whim, why take it any further? What else is there to gain? Well, here's where explanations are decidedly more difficult, because even the Illuminati themselves say there is another unseen hand that controls even them. But suffice to say for now that the reality that we live in, what we perceive as being reality, is not reality.
It is also known that before the appearance of the Dajjal, a group of people will pave the way, setting up a system to prepare the world for his arrival. In other words, these forerunner to the Dajjal and their system will bear all the characteristics of the Dajjal, and he will be the final embodiment of these in human form. The one eye is one of the ways to recognize the Dajjal.
The grip of the entered apprentice is made by pressing the thumb against the top of the first knuckle joint of the fellow mason. The pass grip of the fellow craft is taken as in an ordinary handshake, and the mason presses the top of his thumb against the space between the first and second knuckle joints.
But guess what? One day, يومئذ تحدث أخبارها بأن ربك أوحى لها. One day the earth will speak, and all your lies are now going to be exposed. And on that day we'll have confirmation for what we now suspect.
For as the earth cries out because of the corruption and injustice they have spread over the land, through the agonizing centuries of their domination, the world is witnessing the reawakening of an old warrior. Now, the Freemasons have another enemy to contend with, an enemy which they have thought that they have destroyed, an enemy that will never bow down to the evil and demonic plan of the Freemasons. That enemy is Islam, and against it they have declared. During World War I, the Freemasonic governments managed to destroy the Islamic Caliphate and annex all its territories. The part now called Iraq was put to British mandate, and current borders were defined by them and through the Iran-Iraq War. During World War II, Germany was completely annexed by Britain and France, along with the United States, another Masonic nation, and the Soviet Union. Under complete Masonic control, an economic union may suffice, but to keep it there, they would need a military union, and that union would be none other than the UN. There will be one currency, one economy, and one government. And the government would most certainly be a Masonic government.
O Muslims, let me tell you something that you should need to know. There's a report that's been put out. This report has been developed in America. It is what most of the governments in the world today are using as a ruler and a parameter to judge Muslims, to evaluate Muslims, to diagnose Muslims. And let me read to you what they have said concerning us. They are fundamentalists, they are traditionalists, they are modernists, and they are secularists. Let me define those terminologies for you. Fundamentalist means those people who are saying we want to go back to the Quran and the Sunnah. We want to establish the Quran and the Sunnah. We want to follow the 3 generations of Islam. No, we do not want bid'ah. We don't want ghulu. We don't want excess. We want Islam, the Quran, and the Sunnah, and all our actions, and that's it. They call us, those who say that, fundamentalists. Although in Islam there's nothing called fundamentalism. Then there are the traditionalists. These are the people who also say they follow the Quran and the Sunnah, but they hold on to a certain classical tradition. They say we are Wahhabi. They say we are Hanafi. They say we are Shi'i. They say we are Maliki. Although those four men, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, Imam Shafi rahimahullah, Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, although those are our fathers, those are our scholars, those are the mujtahideen of Islam and the greatest people who brought dalil to us from those generations, no doubt. But following them blindly as a tradition is what the category here is. People who follow them blindly, and therefore they don't unite with anybody else except those who follow each one blindly. They are called traditionalists. Then there are the modernists. The modernists are those who want to make a new interpretation of the Quran. They want to make a new interpretation of the Sunnah. They want to make a new interpretation of Islam. In fact, they are the people who want to join all the religions together to have what they call peaceful coexistence. They are the people who call themselves Wahdatul Adiyan. That is, they want to join with all the religions together. Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianism, Semitism, so on, so on, so on, so on, so. Make it one all religion. It even sounds funny, don't it?
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order. A world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
We don't know who might become the leader of this new world religion. But the people who call for that among the Muslims, they are the misguided people, and they have joined the enemies of Islam. No matter how intellectual they are, no matter how sincere they are, no matter how educated that they are, they have joined the camp of the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they have said by doing so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not given to us the haqq. And that this deen of the Quran and the Sunnah and the wala and bara, the loyalty and the disassociation, the loyalty for the Muslims and the disassociation of the Kafirs, that there's nothing like that in Islam. We just go along down the road with whoever's happy with us, we happy with them too.
These times of tribulation are like a giant sieve, sorting out the true believers from the apostates and hypocrites. Many have adopted the lifestyle and philosophy of the Dajjal system, retaining perhaps only their Muslim names or clothing.
This time हमने कपड़े वगैरह बनाए हैं बच्चों के लिए और सारे मुस्लिम स्टाइल के और see अभी इतने used to नहीं रहते हैं, so I like to do that. So on Eid we'll do that. It's very simple.
Wearing them like a badge to their identity, and in every other way embracing wholeheartedly the system that is being used to eradicate Islam. A system that stood still whilst mothers saw their children dragged away by soldiers during the night, never to return, simply because they spoke out against being refugees in their own homeland. And the same system that said nothing to the tyrant, that gassed women and children simply because he danced the Masonic tune. For those who choose this system, claim to love Allah and His Messenger, but hate what He has brought, leave the guidance that is Islam, and they adhere to the evil system of the Dajjal, living their lives in accordance with its rules, and seeking from it worldly rewards, disregarding the truth that is the laws of Allah.
O Muslims, they have come up also with a formula. Not only have they classified us, but they have also come up with a formula to deal with every category, and how to create hostility and opposition between the different categories.
The Prophet Muhammad said that a time would come when the whole world would gather around to plan the destruction of the Muslims. as if they were gathered around a table to take part in a meal. Today the nations of the world are doing just that, around the circular tables of the United Nations General Assembly Hall. He also said the time of the Dajjal will be years of confusion. People will believe a liar and disbelieve one who is trustworthy, and those who rebel against God will have a say in general affairs.
They have determined that the greatest threat to Western civilization and the continued dominance of Western culture is to make sure that no nation among the Muslims develop among themselves a global identity. And secondly, they never, ever, ever have the ability to reestablish the Khilafah. Now this is in their protocols. This is what you should understand. This is what they're preserving. This division is subtle and hidden, meaning that most Muslims wouldn't even know it.
They have divided and conquered, instilling diseases such as nationalism and racism into the heart of the Ummah. Their biggest fear is Muslim unity and revival of the message brought by the last prophet to mankind. Without the division of wealth and false leadership of these nations, nothing would prevent the purest Islamic movements from coming to power. And Muslim unity is the greatest fear of the forerunners to the Dajjal.
In this way, we can maximize our global agenda and we can minimize any global threat from them. SubhanAllah. Look how clear they are. Look how bold they are. Look how blatant they are. And look how accurate they are.
The systems set up by the forerunners to the Dajjal have ensnared many Muslims away from truth, using lures such as wealth and materialism and fulfillment of earthly desires. The Dajjal has placed a strong hold in the very heart of Islam itself and laid a firm grip on the Muslim holy lands.
If anyone chooses to argue that the Khilafah can be restored before the advent of Imam al-Mahdi, I have no quarrel with him. No. If he wants to launch a movement to restore the Khilafah now, I don't have any quarrel with him, and you should not have any quarrel with him. We have come to this conclusion because we understand that Ya'juj and Ma'juj were released in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. And we therefore recognize the world order which today controls the world to be the world order of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. You do not, but we do.
All three books describe the plan for an apocalypse or third world war, which will give birth to one world empire and one world leader. This one world leader is called the Antichrist.
And now history repeats itself. The prophecy is being fulfilled.
World War III would be ignited by fueling aggression between the Zionists of Israel and the Arab world, who would eventually destroy one another. Social, political, and economic chaos would then force the masses to accept one world army and one world government ruled by the Illuminati.
World War III is to be fomented by using the so-called controversies the agents of the Illuminati, operating under whatever new name, are now stirring up between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Muslim world. That war is to be directed in such a manner that all of Islam and political Zionism, Israel, will destroy each other, while at the same time the remaining nations, once more divided on this issue, will be forced to fight themselves into a state of complete exhaustion after World War III is ended. Indoctrination into accepting the idea that only a one-world government can put an end to recurring wars and strife.
If you disagree with me, you say, we never heard this before. Our sheikhs who taught us Islam, they never talked about this, so you must be wrong. My response is wait and see. That's all. I don't have to say anything more than that.
Holy Prophet ﷺ mentioned by way of prophecy that one thing, that in that age the real faith will not be found among the Muslims. He mentioned that their scholars will not be really leading the people to guidance. Their places of worship will be very well attended, but without any guidance. It indicates that the scholars at that time, they will be similarly, their character will be simply a character of mockery. They would not be representing the right faith.
In World War II, Israel was to be born. And the Zionists were given power. So since the first two wars came off just exactly as that letter said, and that letter used to hang right in the British Museum library until 1977 when Baron Rothschild became a director. And as soon as he was on the board of directors, that letter disappeared from the library. Immediately. But since that letter so clearly delineated the first two world wars, I think we have to look at it seriously and take it to heart when it says in there so clearly that the Third World War will be fomented between the Zionists and Islam. Does anybody see that materializing today? Every place we look, we can see it happening. And we can see that the power they have here in this country to run things and to prepare the world for a new world order.
If we recognize this world order to be the world order of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and so long as they control the world, you cannot restore the Khilafah. They will destroy it.
If tomorrow peace broke out in between Israelis and Palestinians, does anybody think there wouldn't be a full-blown war in Iraq? You know, I used to say early on when I was a kid, I'd say, when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
Here in Washington, D.C., beneath a statue of Albert Pike, author William T. Still explains the contents of this remarkable letter.
This was a letter that was written by the head of European Masonry, a man by the name of Mazzini, who wrote it to Albert Pike about 1871. It was in the British Museum for a number of years on display, so we know it existed. It's now disappeared, incidentally. The subject of the letter was to try to figure out a way to finally get humankind to give up their cherished concept of nationalism and finally give in to the New World Order internationalist construct. The letter called for a series of 3 world wars. The Third World War would be between the Jews and the Muslims and would bring about the Battle of Armageddon and would finally make mankind so sick of warfare that they'd give up their cherished concept of nationalism and give in to the New World Order concept.
We can usher in a new era of enhanced prosperity and peace.
America must play its role in ushering in a new era of peace.
At least I'm giving you a wake-up call. A wake-up call that you're living in the age of the countdown. So don't be fighting each other over chicken feed. That's what you're doing. In South Africa in particular, the ulama fighting with each other. Sectarian conflicts over chicken feed. While this hugely important subject is so far away from them, it is unbelievable. The prophecy is being fulfilled, but they're being deceived in the grandest and most magnificent deception mankind has ever witnessed.
Even the New World Order cannot guarantee an era of perpetual peace, but enduring peace must be our mission.
When he has completed his mission, then comes the unfolding of the events where the true Messiah will kill the false Messiah and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will destroy Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Then it will be possible to restore the Khilafah. How long will a day which is like a week last? How long?
So when Dajjal was in a day which is like a year, Britain was his headquarters. And when Dajjal moves to a day which is like a month, the United States of America became his headquarters. And finally when Dajjal is going to be in a day which is like a week, he comes back home to the Holy Land. He comes back home to the Holy Land.
When Israel takes over from the United States with that big war which is about to take place, and the American economy collapses and the US dollar collapses and all the paper money in the world collapses, then we see that transfer of power.
Good evening, everybody. President Obama and British Prime Minister Gordon today calling for a new world order to tackle our global economic crisis. President Obama said globalization can be an enormous force for good.
When a day which is like a week has come to an end, and we will know that because the water in the Sea of Galilee would have dried up. That is the time when these events are now going to take place. The advent of Imam al-Mahdi, Dajjal appearing in a day which is like our day, so we'll see him as a Jew, etc., and the Son of Mary coming down. There are some of you who have become a bit uncomfortable with my statement, because it is when the water in the Sea of Galilee dries up that the Son of Mary will come back down. Go and read your Sahih Muslim. It is at that time, and go and notice the water level in the Sea of Galilee now. It is lower than it has ever been before in history.
The waters the Bible tells us Jesus walked on, the shores where he performed his miracles, a place of beauty, religion and legend, but today on the brink of disaster.
The water should be above our heads, in fact. The tragedy is that you don't need to be Jesus Christ anymore to walk here on the Sea of Galilee.
Environmentalist Guidon Bromberg and I could walk the floor of the lake because its waters have retreated hundreds of yards. This bay should be full of water right up to those rocks. The Sea of Galilee is so low it must be pumped uphill into the Jordan now, the river it should feed. Otherwise its baptism sites would dry up. But the Jordan doesn't flow much further from here.
Lebanon is about to take water out of that river, and Israel is saying, if you do that, we're going to wage war against you. Why? Because that water runs into the Sea of Galilee. Yes.
Just a few miles to the south, this is where the Jordan comes to an end. Its last few drops are drawn off by that pumping station over there for irrigation. Then there's this, Israel's dirty little secret. The Jordan, possibly the most famous river in the world, rises again as raw sewage being poured out of that drain.
Israel's announced an emergency. A lineup of celebrities, including supermodel Bar Raffaelli. Their faces cracking to tell Israelis to save the Sea of Galilee.
And the Jews? They can watch the Sea of Galilee going on and drying up. And they can realize that the moment is coming. Ya Muslim, هذا يهودي ورائي فتعال فاقتل.
Israeli authorities deny mismanagement. Instead, they blame the weather.
Such a drought of 5 successive years, that's something we never met. And that's also something that statistically is really rare.
On the waters, boatmen who fish for tourists are deeply alarmed.
We used to use the first pier, and then the water level went down, so we brought another one, and now another one.
Do you think it's going to get better?
We pray it will be better, and it will be. We trust God.
It'll need more than divine intervention. Scientists say if the Sea of Galilee sinks another metre or two, it could reach a point of no return, and this could be lost forever. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, the Galilee.
And so the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is now moving to center stage. Let us begin by making a distinction between the end of history and the end of the world. When the end of the world will come, nobody knows. Only Allah. That knowledge resides with Him. Only Him. Our subject is different. We're dealing with the end of history, not the end of the world.
On December 21st, 2012, the Earth will be in exact alignment with the Sun and the center of the Milky Way galaxy. A galactic event that takes place only once every 25,800 years. No one knows what effect this extraordinary alignment will have on the Earth.
I may be wrong, but I suspect that there's going to be a massive collapse of the world of modern technology. I suspect that. And so horses are now going to be used once again.
The world's electrical power grid is too vulnerable right now to withstand such an aggressive onslaught of solar particles. Dan Baker heads the Space and Atmospheric Physics Laboratory at the University of Colorado at Boulder. He co-authored a recent report outlining the dangers of a monster solar storm.
The estimates that were made of what this might cost
society would be in the range of not billions of dollars, but perhaps $1 trillion or up to $10 trillion with an outage that might last for several years.
The danger of a massive power failure in 2012 is a wake-up call.
When the water in the Sea of Galilee is drying up, and the state of Israel has ruled the world for a day which is like a week, then in Sahih Muslim we are told, a Muslim ruler will die and there will be disagreement concerning succession. And then a man is going to come out of Mecca. His name will be my name and his father's name will be my father's name, said the Prophet ﷺ. He'll have a broad forehead and a large nose, and he'll be known as Al-Mahdi. And he'd hurry from Medina to Mecca. As he approaches Mecca, people are going to come out to him, so this has to be a well-known person, not some obscure non-entity, a well-known person. When the people of Mecca come out to him, they'll force him to accept the bay'ah, the oath of allegiance which legitimizes the leadership of the Amir al-Mu'mineen, bay'ah. He will accept the bay'ah at the Kaaba and then proclaim himself to be Al-Mahdi. There are going to be eclipses of the sun and the moon that month.
The next image in the series is the end-all and be-all of the whole sequence. It shows the exact time when the apocalypse is going to happen. At the top we see our alignment of divine cross and terrestrial cross. Below that we see 3 eclipses connected to an eclipse of the moon.
But there have been eclipses of the sun and the moon in the past.
If we look for 3 solar eclipses within a time period that is also bound by very significant lunar eclipses, we come up with a 20-year time period from 1992 to 2012.
After he proclaims himself Al-Mahdi, he's going to be attacked from an army, with an army from Sham. That army comes down to the south, and armies are under the control of governments. And when that army is between Medina and Mecca going down south, the earth is going to open and swallow that army.
Massive earthquakes obliterate our cities. Mountains collapse, and the world's supervolcanoes all erupt simultaneously. Essentially, humanity would be wiped off the planet.
Geophysicists have a theory that is strikingly similar to the events predicted by the Mayan alignment. This phenomenon is called pole shift, in which the entire mantle of the Earth would shift in a matter of days, perhaps hours, changing the position of the North and South Pole, causing worldwide disaster. Earthquakes would rock every continent, and a new study from Princeton University reveals that the poles have shifted before. The North Pole rested in the middle of the Pacific 800 million years ago, placing Alaska at the equator.
That is the sign of all signs. When the army is swallowed, then the Mahdi is going to be attacked by another army, and this is now an army of the Quraysh, an army of the Kalb. And remember that armies are under the control of governments. The Mahdi will defeat this army, and when an army is defeated, that is the end of Saudi Arabia. Goodbye to bad rubbish. The jihad is already in force to liberate the territory from where the army will come, from Khorasan. No one can stop that jihad.
ولا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا ربهم يرزقون فرحين بما آتاهم الله من فضله ويستبشرون بالذين لم يلحقوا بهم من خلفهم ألا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون
This territory has one thing distinctive about it, that Europe could never colonize the heart of Khorasan. The British tried when Britain was the ruling state in the world, and the British failed. And then the Russians tried when they had the superpower, the Soviet Union. And after 12 years, the Russians failed. And guess who is trying now?
I didn't think it would end this way.
End? No, the journey doesn't end here. Death is just another path. One that we all must take. And then you see it.
It will not be the destruction of the earth. Rather, says the Quran, on that day there will be a transformation, and creation will be transformed. This one, for example, is a world of space and time, and it will be transformed into something different.
And that's not so bad.
No, it isn't.
When Darul Islam is restored in the Arabian Peninsula, this is now the most dangerous and potent of all threats to the state of Israel. Dajjal will now attack. He's now in a day which is like our day. And so we see him, a Jew, a young man, powerful, built, curly hair. But I'm not saying anything about his eyes because you understand the hadith about the eyes now. The Prophet ﷺ pointed his hands to the east 20 times. And he said he's going to come from the east. Jerusalem is northwest. When Israel attacked Jamal Abdel Nasser, although Israel is to the east of Egypt, Israel attacked from the west and destroyed the Egyptian Air Force on the ground. Dajjal is not going to attack from the northwest. He attacks from the east 20 times, said Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. He can come from the east. When he attacks, he's going to be riding on a donkey, which will travel as fast as the clouds, and which is have his ears stretched out wide. I'm going to Perth, inshallah, on Thursday on that donkey. And so, we're talking about fighter aircraft. And east of Medina and Mecca is the Saudi Air Force Base, which is now also an American Air Force Base in Dhahran.
In exchange for our free use of the Dhahran airfield, they wanted all kinds of material. They wanted tanks, for one thing, and they wanted training, and they wanted planes, and they wanted anything we would give them.
As they attack Mecca and Medina, they aim angels defend Makkah and Medina. This is there in Sahih Muslim. And the attack is diverted to Damascus. And then the confrontation takes place. Dajjal is outside and the Imam is inside the masjid. As the Jews are rubbing their hands, we've got them now, we've cornered them. But now history repeats itself. The divine method of positive identification is repeated. As the son of Mary comes down in the masjid, Imam al-Mahdi says, here he is, this is the son of Mary. Imam asks him, you lead the salat. He says, no, you are the Imam, you lead. After the salat, then the confrontation takes place between the false Messiah and the true Messiah. And the false Messiah is killed, and then Gog and Magog are destroyed. And after Gog and Magog are destroyed and Dajjal is killed, now the state of Israel is without any support. Now it's going to be a level battlefield, a level battlefield. The army now comes out of Khorasan, and that army attacks and destroys the state of Israel. The first time it was a Babylonian army. The second time it was a Roman army. And after the Roman army destroyed them and threw them out of the land, Allah said, وَإِنْ عُدْتُمْ عُدْنَا وَإِنْ عُدْتُمْ عُدْنَا. If you return with your fasad, we will return with our punishment. They return with their fasad. It's happening now before your eyes. And so Allah returns with His punishment. وَإِنْ عُدْتُمْ عُدْنَا. And so now the Muslim army destroys the state of Israel. It is at this time that the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, the hadith in Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, you will know who is the true leader amongst the Muslims today. Because he'll not be afraid to quote this hadith. And you'll know those who betray Islam because they will never quote this hadith. Never. They'll lose their jobs. لَتُقَاتِلُنَّ الْيَهُودِ وَلَتَقْتُلُنَّهُمْ حَتَّى يَقُولُ الْحَجَرُ يَا مُسْلِمْ هَذَا يَهُودِيٌّ وَرَئِي فَتَعَالَ فَاقْتُلْ. If you're 17 years of age tonight, this is music in your heart. This ends the subject of Imam al-Mahdi and the return of the Khilafah.